I'm very fond of writing stories, so I thought today, 10, 10, 10. Chinese would consider that very lucky. 10, 10, 10. Dirigo. I thought I'd write you a story in 10 little chapters for contemplative value. We use the words meditation and contemplation pretty much synonymously in our country. I have a background in history of religions, and so I don't use it that way. I use meditation to suggest undercutting thought, becoming still, quiet, by means of undercutting thought. Thought comes in, my aunt's going to murder me. Don't pay attention to it. Keep on watching your breath. Thought comes in, I can't stand my aunt. Keep on watching your breath. Pay no attention. Contemplation is just the opposite. It says, take a large body of thought, right? Aggregate it into a symbol and use it then in application to something very general. So we have adages, we have mythic images, we have proverbs, the sort of thing that can then aggregate a lot into a little, use a little to say a lot. So this story that I've written for you this morning is about how we can, because I firmly believe this, how we can, as individuals, certainly not excluding the growth of this movement, many individuals, how we can save ourselves from death by means of inspiring change predicated on self-cultivation, using profoundly deep contemplation about the nature of consciousness. So here's my 10-10 story that I wrote for you. Finished it this morning after I watched the baby a little bit. It goes this way. It's the 10-10 story of yin yang and how it began in Maine, where dirigo means I lead. Preamble. In principle and in fact, for superior or inferior outcomes, the nature of the universe is enacted in the character in our perspectives. Fundamentally, then, interdependent and universally connected, we are always magnifying or diminishing differences between perspectives that arise from the same polar roots in consciousness. Yin and yang want to introduce themselves as one way. Chapter 1. Yin says, as a primary method for individuals to accelerate creative human development and technical innovations in support of global sustainability, I advocate change by means of contemplative education, used to transform the conceptual roots of global conflict. In this sense, self-cultivation reflecting universal creativity is the ultimate key to sustainability. In that process, as reflections on universal principles for conflict resolution are considered, discussed, and tested in common dialogues, Main Street can become a highway to higher consciousness, where sage philosophic and psychological perspectives become standards for integrating solid cultural foundations for sustainable life on Earth. Chapter 2. Yang said, if the wisdom we are capable of is framed within comprehensive symbols of consciousness, out of the depths of our personalities, as conflict finds its proper place in service to creative conflict resolution, the principles in our private lives can regenerate the state of the world at large. Chapter 3. Yin turns and says, reciprocity between polar points of contrast is the basis of the universal dynamics of change. Therefore, because reciprocity characterizes the universe, the character of superior human development naturally instigates flows between individuality and life as a collective union. This is what I call mystical humanism. And I offer that concept as a call to contemplative action. The destiny of dignity is to act as nature's antidote to our collective dysfunctions. Chapter 4. Yang piped up. Contemplative education is critical for reflecting on universal principles of creativity and contemplatively listening to the human voice seems to orchestrate concentration with the effective force of music or the touching sounds of poetry or truth intoned in a sermon. Then Yin said in chapter 5, just as a child without language can begin to learn complex systems of thought, contemplative listening is like being around an ancient campfire, where mythic stories of conflict resolution conveniently transported comprehensive principles into the fabric of common human relations. Our archetypal heritage is to first listen, then act to live. Thereby, on the road to survival and the survival of the basics to civilization, key practices for efficient, effective, and timely change are to be inspired by key principles packaged in edutainment for deep contemplative concentration. And by means of contemplative action, the power in sage perspectives generates ubiquitous creativity to reform ubiquitous potentials for destruction. Chapter 6, Yang says, change is a dance between polar principles. Thereby we have the universe, and thereby universal principles of universal change are the essence of the past, present, and future state of all the contents of consciousness. Alternating in states of conflict or conflict resolution by means of cycles and sequences of changing polarities, we awaken or remain asleep, dream or act, recognize or misperceive, learn or not, hate, love, live, and die amid contrasting ties. Intrinsic to wholeness, consciousness generates change, and change is understood or misunderstood in symbolic or actual associations, where positive and negative perceptions are possible to be timely or untimely in finite instances of infinite contrast. Yin said in chapter 7, consequent to creativity in overall human development, being open to wisdom progressively leads to understanding differences. In contrast, resistance to such creativity typifies reactionary perspectives, where self-centered thinking haplessly channels universal principles for discord. Then in chapter 8, Yang says, clarity in contrast to confusion is potential at all stages of human development. Yet confusion can so undercut clarity on all sides of all issues that it is common to us assume adequate preparation for conflict resolution based on inadequate assumptions for genuine peace. Then Yin came in chapter 9 and said, in the story of confusion versus clarity, truth as we may understand it may be alternative to truth as it needs to be understood. Therefore, despite the strength of how we may feel in the intimate relationship between collective confusion and the state of our individual insights, stealth ignorance regularly invites untimeliness, even as it may prompt some to say that they speak for the mind of God. In chapter 10, Yang said, therefore, to change the bad for the good, and what's good for what's better in world affairs, contemplation can concentrate key outlines for a universal philosophy and psychology of consciousness. Wise brings light. Otherwise brings dark. This is the way that it is for peace, not one way among many, but the way to unite the many. Only wisdom can see for relief. Therefore, understanding the nature of change changes the nature of understanding. To fulfill that mission, contemplative reflections on sage perspectives for global conflict resolution lend central support to saving the world. Thank you, everyone.